Hey everyone, welcome back to a second chance. My name is Philip Jones, kidney transplant recipient.
And hi, my name is Tafaro Cook, two-time kidney transplant recipient and founder of Kidney Care Coaches, where we coach people with stage 3 to stage 5 kidney disease. If you or you know someone who has kidney disease challenges and needs to be coached, hit us up at kidneycarecoaches.com.
So today we have a wonderful guest with us this evening. Brenda is a kidney transplant recipient, currently back on dialysis. So, Brenda, how are you today?
I'm doing great.
Awesome. Thank you again for joining us. So go ahead and take a couple minutes, just introduce yourself to everybody that's watching, and then we'll get into our questions.
Okay, wonderful. My name is Brenda Jackson Darling. I am a past kidney transplant recipient. As Philip said, now back on dialysis. I had a living donor in 2012. My kidneys failed as a result of having several into my kidney to diagnose those infections and being hypertensive after my second pregnancy. I had renal insufficiency for probably 24 years and was fortunate for my kidneys to last that long. In 2012, my kidneys finally failed. Before that, in 2010, when I was told that I was going to need dialysis, I began to prepare. And but I had a man who stepped up to the plate, gave me the gift of life. But at 2010, I realized that I probably had a little bit more life in my kidneys, and I did. So we put a surgery off, and my kidneys actually lasted until 2012. Surgery was then, and it went very well. The kidney began to work right away. But unfortunately, about 3 months after the surgery, I began to develop infection. Result of that, multiple days in the hospital, numerous rounds of antibiotics, my kidneys began to fail, and I subsequently ended up on dialysis. I was very fortunate in this entire kidney journey to have a background in nursing. I've been a nurse for over 30 years. A lot of that time was spent in dialysis units. And I realized, being a dialysis nurse, that if I ever faced this journey myself, going to have, and that was going to meal dialysis. Once my transplant failed, that was the option that I chose. Fortunately, I was well versed in these options, and I'd like to just point out here that many of our brothers and sisters in the African American community are not afforded the opportunity that I had to be given these options, be made available of the options, plants, and home dialysis. It's very important that we who are in the kidney community educate those and make those aware who are now in dialysis units, struggling with dialysis, to let them know that there are options that you can have home hemodialysis. You can have transplants that these alternative therapies will give you life. Dialysis keep you alive, but these alternatives give you life. And I've been very fortunate to have therapies have just given me improved a quality of life. So I started dialysis 2019. Hemo had to transition to hemo, which I'm currently doing right now.
Awesome. So let's start from the beginning. Uh, where did your love for wanting to become a nurse, not just necessarily a dialysis nurse, but just a nurse in general, start at?
When did I start nursing? Nursing was always a dream for me. I can say from a young woman, high school, I started out being a candy striper. You guys probably don't even know what that what that is. but in the Stone Ages, you can volunteer, and we actually wore these little pinafores because they were red and white stripes. And I volunteer on nursing units, passing out flowers or magazines to patients and things like that. So nursing was always a part of me. And it wasn't just a job; it was a career. It was a passion, and I got my nursing degree in 1979. And my first job was on a nursing unit and a med surg unit. And I worked there for many years. Dialysis units. And from there, I think I worked there for about 7 years. And then I found my true passion, which was post anesthesia nursing, the recovery room. And that's where I did the majority of my nursing career. I managed a unit in about 450-bed hospital in my city, Gainesville, Florida, and stayed there until that closed and we merged with Shands Hospital, Shands Healthcare System within United States. And did that until I learned that I was in renal failure. I always thought I was going to be able to go back to work, but unfortunately, once I started with these infections, I was forced to give up my livelihood. And but I've always kept my license active. I'm working on my contact hours now to renew in April because I've always wanted to share activities and things like that. I volunteer at the homeless clinics, things for the underinsured, just to keep my hands in it. Like I said, it wasn't just a job; it was a passion for me. So I always want to make sure that as long as I'm able, I can reach back and pay it forward, so to speak.
That's wonderful, and I can hear the passion in you, especially from you wanting to keep those licenses going and things like that. You could definitely tell that, hey, I ain't never giving up, and I appreciate that. I love the encouragement like that.
Absolutely.
Yes. So you're from Florida. You always lived in Florida, correct?
I've lived in several other places, South Carolina, and actually, how I got there was I was working at a dialysis unit here in Gainesville, Florida, and they wanted to open a home training unit at Parkland Memorial in Columbia, South Carolina, and I chose to move from here to go up there to help open that home training unit, peritoneal home dialysis up there. And so that took me to Columbia, South Carolina for a while. I've lived in recently in Daytona Beach. That was sort of a sabbatical for me after some not so pleasant breakup. And I lived there and moved back to Gainesville once I began having grandchildren. And I've been here ever since. And I now have five.
Okay. Okay. So let me ask you this with the modalities. Now you've done hemo before and you did peritoneal. What was your thought process when you're going, you're being a nurse and you're seeing all these people do these treatments and things like that, and all of a sudden your kidneys start acting up. Can you tell us like the experience you had? Like what was the first initial process of oh I'm having some kidney challenges, and where was you at in the time of your life?
Um, I was right after giving birth, 6 months after
Okay.
giving birth to my youngest son. And it was only through a blood test that I had some challenges, renal insufficiency. And again, I met with a nephrologist and I stayed with that nephrologist from 1991 until I was transplanted in 2012.
Mm.
In 2000, and this was a physician that I worked with in my dialysis unit. So I knew him pretty closely. In 1997, I finally asked him, this is 6 years in, where are we going with this? What time in a year you're going to need dialysis? And having worked in dialysis units, I knew that neither of the options that were available, through dialysis. At that time, I was primarily a hemodialysis nurse. And that was not what I wanted to do. Because to me, I'm just going to be frank with you, I felt like dialysis was a death sentence. And I didn't want that for myself. So that's when I began. Unfortunately, no one in my family was a match. My children at the time were not of age to be tested. And I had, for whatever reason, a high PRA level. If I were to be matched or tested against the general population, I would only match with about 22 people out of 100. So my odds were not very good.
What was that reason? Was it because your antigens were high? What was the challenge with that?
Yes. And I don't know if it was because working in nursing, just coming in contact with so many different, germs or bugs or whatever. But yeah, I had never had a blood transfusion, nothing like that with my pregnancies or anything. But it was just high.
That's
And
wild. Usually we
yeah,
don't hear that.
mhm,
Usually when you hear something like that, it's because the person got a lot of blood transfusions, like
yeah,
myself, or
nothing
just high
like
antigens. That's
that.
wild.
And it was very, very, very unusual. And, it kind of surprised my transplant team as well. But yes, I had 88%, 88%.
Mm,
So it was a miracle, that I had a living donor. And so it was extremely disturbing to me that this was happening. But I can say, being a dialysis nurse, I can remember uh, for some reason I had this when your creatinine hits 4, then we're going to do something. And there were times, being a dialysis nurse, you're on call because things happen. But I would get called in, to start patients on dialysis, particularly our people of color, and they had no idea they were in renal failure. They go to the
mm.
ER. My head's been killing me for 4 or 5 days, and I don't know what's wrong with me. And they realize that their blood is a silent killer.
Right,
Not only does it kills us, it kills your kidneys, and they show up in my unit in renal failure.
right.
My renal function was less than theirs, but
What do you think about that? Do you think it's a money thing? I'm just gonna keep it real with you. I hate to.
with
Yeah,
you.
yeah.
I'm
It's.
with you. It absolutely is. It absolutely is because
I mean, I was gonna put it out there. I'll just keep it real.
um, dialysis, Medicare pays,
Yeah.
and when we begin to educate ourselves and begin to challenge these physicians to say, hey, until my number gets, if I'm feeling okay and
Right.
my level is not, no, no.
Right.
But yes, my function was absolutely less, and my numbers were higher than many people that I started on dialysis. And I want to say, you don't need to do this shit, but I'm just a nurse. And but yes, I've seen it,
Brenda,
and I
I think Brenda, what goes on to me personally is I've seen this also. I did dialysis and currently on dialysis right now. But what's crazy about that situation is lack of education. When you don't know, you don't know. So therefore, you're listening to the doctor. They can put you on dialysis, and your numbers can be okay. But what people don't understand is if you started early like that, you can mess up the little bit of kidney function that
residual function that you have, you're gonna lose it.
you're gonna
You're
lose it.
gonna
Right.
lose it.
Right.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's lack of education because they aren't going to tell you.
Yep.
They're not going to tell you because it's to their advantage not to tell you.
Hmm.
And I've
Exactly
seen
right.
it over and over and over again. Just recently, this horror story. Young lady was telling me. she was on dialysis, and she would have such panic and anxiety attacks the night before dialysis. She couldn't sleep. And her cousin asked me to talk to her. And when I did, she was telling me, she said, I didn't know what was happening to me. They just brought a paper in for me to sign. I signed it. The next day, I knew I had this thing in my chest, and they sent me to this place and sat me in a chair and connect me to this machine. And I don't even know. I said, well, what is your creatinine? She said, what is that?
Lack
What do
of
you mean?
education. And you know what's scary about that whole situation is I hate to say it, but they're not trying to educate people. And sometimes
No,
in the black community, the education is lacking, and they're not trying to educate you. They're trying to. It seems like assembly line,
no.
assembly line to get you where
It's
they
a
want to
simple
go.
line. I mean, we see a disease because these are diseases that affect primarily African Americans, and
Right.
the money is not being spent in research. It's not going there because it's our people of color.
It's
It's like
us.
we're marginalized, we're disenfranchised because it's like we don't care, we don't matter. We
Right.
don't matter until we stand up and give ourselves a voice and be heard. No
True.
one's not going to do anything. They're going to do it for us.
Right.
They're not going to
Dialysis
do
is
it
a
for us.
$40 billion industry a year. We're talking about 40 billion with a B. So that's a lot of money. And
It's a lot of
98% of
money.
it, 90 to 98% of it is Medicaid, Medicare driven. So they know they're gonna
Right.
get their money.
You're
And
going to
so
get
how
that
they get
money.
their money is from, I hate to say it like this, but black and brown people. And that's where the money is stimulated from. So by keeping those two communities uneducated, the money is driving the whole situation.
They're driving, yes. And it's, you say, an assembly line. They come in, they push them in. It's like, treat them and treat them. Treat them and treat them. We don't
That's
educate
it.
them. We don't talk to them about it. We don't tell them we have alternative options. Nothing like that. Because once they're out of that chair, we're no longer going to get paid. Once
That's
they
it.
leave here and get transplanted and they go to home therapy, they're not getting paid. Now, once they go to home therapy, we have to train them. We have to educate them. But as long as they sit in their chair, sit their arm out, put headphones on, turn the TV on, and they don't care. They don't care. And so it's so unfortunate. And I feel very, very strongly about this. I'm all advocacy, education, and awareness. And so I just in where to break in, to begin to educate um, our people, dialysis units, to let them know that they have options.
Well, Brenda, I think the education is,
When
is
I was,
important. The educate Brenda, the education is very, very important. But there, this wheel, and I'm talking about this big wheel that gets you on dialysis, sets you down, put the needles in your arm or the CVC in your chest, whatever it may be. It's almost, if you look at it, the dialysis, just a whole, it's almost a comfortable situation where people are so comfortable in their situation that they don't even respond to get better. They just sit there like, like, okay, and very seldom do you hear about people getting transplants. You don't hear people getting well. You hear people just mostly staying in this modality of dialysis. And it's just to keep you comfortable. I hate to say it like that. They got the TV on, you're in this lounge chair, you're getting this treatment, and then you just go on while the money is
mm-hmm,
still just going and going. And this
mm-hmm,
it's this, and it's like every patient is like a clog in this wheel, in this big wheel that goes on. And how do you put a stop, not a stop to the wheel, because we know dialysis is helping people, but how do we prevent that person, that avatar? Who is that person? She could be 30, 35 years old. She finds out her kidneys aren't working as well. She goes to the hospital, and the first thing they want to do is put a mapping in her arm and do all these things without even educating her, without even telling her about things she can do for her blood pressure or her diabetes or any of these things. They just straight put you on this assembly line. How do we
Mhm.
prevent that piece right there? That's the question.
That is the $1 million question. It has to be a stopgap somewhere. It has to be a person or a position or some identity, entity that is able to come in at that point, be it case management, be it social work, be it someone at that point to say, let's educate this person to let them know that there are options. You have options to say at this point, because there's a young woman, that I know that was at this juncture, but they were able to medicate her for a couple of years before she had to be transplanted. To say that we don't have to go this route at this point. Let's see if we can intervene with Medicare. Have before we can go this route with dialysis. Or rather than dialysis, what about a preemptive transplant? Let's get you on the transplant list and look for a donor. There are other things, alternatives we can do before we get you into this assembly line. And it's very unfortunate because, like you say, this complacency that begins to take place, it becomes a social event for these people. They
Exactly.
see each other 3 times a week. They begin to become, get comfortable with each other. They communicate. They become a little stop.
Yeah.
And like education is the key. And at what point do we stop? We cut off the flow. We put the tourniquet on, so to speak, and we begin to find out what can we do to stop this. But it has to
Right.
it has to stop at
Right.
some point because
Exactly.
these people, they all aren't ready to go on dialysis, and I know that. I've experienced it, and
Right.
and to say that because of my experience, to me it was a death sentence. And being a nurse, you see them go in, you don't see them come out, and
Yep.
eventually that's what happens.
Yeah, here's a question about from educating minorities about transplants. The question is, what will it take to make changes at the dialysis centers? Who is responsible for educating the patients? That's a great question because anytime I've been to dialysis centers just working with patients and things like that, what you tend to get as far as the education is you get a pamphlet here and there. You don't really see social workers too much. They might come and talk to you about your insurance, or they might talk to you about what's going on. You need to see this doctor or whatever. But nobody is sitting nobody down and talking to them about education. Now you might get the nutritionists come around and tell you about your labs. Your phosphorus is high. Your calcium, your protein needs to come up. Those things like that. But nobody is telling you about the different modalities because, Brenda, I work with people who have had challenges with their kidneys, and we've worked with them in natural, holistic parts. Keep an alkaline diet. You know,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
exercise and nutrition, coping mechanisms, and we've seen the creatinine, go back to a 1 or a 2, and we've seen those things. And like I said, there is other ways to handle the kidney disease, and you just don't have to go straight to dialysis. And
Mm-hmm.
that's been the same. When I was 24 years old, when I first got my first kidney transplant, that was the first thing the doctor said. The doctor didn't even say nothing else. He was like, "You need a transplant. You got to go." This. There was nothing else. Well, hey, you can eat like this. You can do this. There was nothing else. It was straight to, if the kidneys go wrong, dialysis or transplant. That was all there was said. And there was never been anything else said. And
Right.
for 15, 20 years, I thought like that until I started reaching out, getting more information. Like, hold on. Oh, you can do an alkaline diet. Oh,
Yes.
you can do this. Oh, you can do that. Your kidneys don't have to fail. You know, but that is not the talk. And the reason why it's not the talk is because the almighty dollar. That's not paying.
Right. Yeah. Well, I can speak from personal experience. During that 24 years when I was dealing with renal insufficiency, just by trial and error, I realized then that I became vegetarian. And only because I realized the more animal protein I ate, how it affected my creatinine. The more I ate, the more my creatinine began to rise. Right. Diets and things of that nature. And I believe that was one of the reasons why my renal insufficiency, just being, at that level, lasted for so long. I didn't go from, having a 1.9 creatinine all the way up to a 4 needing dialysis or a transplant. I hung around 2.2, things like that for 20, 24 years. And it was because, I would have this mantra, most people, and it was because my experience of playing with diets and, experimenting with this diet and that diet and alkaline diets, keeping ash level out of your diet to a minimum. And that came from, the residual effects of animal protein in your diet, and that BUN being high as a result from, increased muscle mass and things like that. So, yeah, it comes from educating yourself. You just can't sit around and just be complacent about.
But Brenda,
I think that it goes it can go both ways. I think some people's story goes the way that the two of yours went, and then I think that some people's story goes the way that mine went. Because, like I said, I was diagnosed at 4 years old. My doctor wanted to keep me as far away as from dialysis and from transplant as possible.
Well, Phil, that's not the
So
usual though. That's all I'm
I
saying.
know, and again,
That's
like I
not the usual.
said, most of the people who's gone through this have probably went your way, right? Where they weren't educated or they didn't have physicians who wanted to make sure that they knew what they were dealing with, make sure that they kept them away from dialysis or transplant, right then and right there. So like I said, my doctor, I saw my doctor every month until even after when I got transitioned to dialysis unit, I saw my doctor every month. Even after then, so again, I'm probably one of the few who are blessed to have those type of physicians who cared enough about me to make sure that I was educated. When I first started seeing my pediatric nephrologist, the first thing he did was make sure that we were knowledgeable on nutrition. Make sure that I stay physically active. I'm behind you, but not too far behind you to still understand the times when going outside to go play was the thing to do, right? Like that was my life as a kid growing up, outside playing football in the street, going down the street to the homie house to play basketball, going to the park or whatever the case may be, right? And that was some things that my doctors instilled into me, which was again, like I said, staying physically active, making sure I move, don't just sit in the house and do nothing, eat certain things and I think the eating certain things part really just kind of was the main thing that stuck with my parents because they were the ones who were just like, hey, you can't go eating this all the time. You can have it sometimes. It's all right to eat sometimes here and there, but not all the time. Don't go out and when you with your cousins over the weekend, every day you eating chili cheese fries or you eating this, you eating that, right? Even though as a kid, that's what you want to do, right? Because you're a kid, that's how you just trying to live, right?
Yeah.
But I had parents. I was fortunate enough to have parents who cared about. I was fortunate enough to have physicians that cared enough to say, hey, if you stay down this path, you can stay away from dialysis and away from transplant as long as possible. And with that being said, my question for you, Brenda, is since we're talking about education, is you went 24 years without needing dialysis. What exactly did you do to make sure that you stayed away as far away from dialysis and transplant as you could when it came to nutrition? Like you just said you went vegan. Did you do physical activity? Was it a mixture of both? Did you just do the nutrition? Because I'm sure for the most part it could probably work with just the nutrition. That's a major part of it. But did you incorporate physical activity? Like how was that process for you?
I did exactly what you did. I didn't work with a nutritionist. These were all things I thought out on my own as far as finding what worked for me. and how it directly related to my kidney function. But I stayed active. Probably when I went through my transplant, I was in the best physical shape of my life. I had just done we have here what's called the Donna Deegan Marathon, and every year we have a marathon in Florida to honor her. And my girlfriend and I, we completed the half marathon. And shortly thereafter, in Jacksonville, Florida, we have a Gate River Run, which is a 9K race, I think it is. And I did that. But training for that, for both of those races was pretty strenuous. And so I ate right. And like you said, like your parents was telling you, there are oftentimes, I wanted to eat things that I knew that I couldn't have, but that restraint came in because I knew in the long run it was going to be better for me. And kudos to your parents, to make sure that you ate right, and what very overprotective, like you can't go outside and play, you can't be involved in this activity, that activity. So many parents do that now, especially when they have a child that is challenged physically or health wise. Parents, but that's exactly what you did. I made sure I ate right, and like I said, I had to eat to live, and I made sure that I was active, and make sure that I was in optimal health, and that's what I had to do. That's what I had to do. It's very important. Very important.
We're going to go to a commercial right now, then we'll come back with Brenda.
welcome back to a second chance. So my question for you, Brenda, is so 3 months after your transplant, you started to deal with UTIs, urinary tract infections. What was that experience like? Because not everybody knows what They hear the words urinary tract infection, but they don't really know what's involved with having to go through that process of hospital stays and medications and things like that. So, what did you have to endure while going through those times admitted in the hospital?
With the transplant, many people don't realize how the anatomy changes. Your native kidneys are located in your back, high up, and pretty far from your bladder. When you have a transplant, of course, your kidney now is located retroperitoneally in the front of your abdomen, and it's located very close to your bladder. So a ureter, which is the tube that carries the urine from your kidney to your bladder, in the normal anatomy is probably about 12 inches long. Once your anatomy changes in a transplant, that ureter is now maybe reduced to about 4 inches from your bladder to your new kidney transplant. Well, after, for whatever reason, my bladder began to retain urine after during my transplant, there was some nerve injury to my bladder, and it not allowed me to my bladder to empty properly.
Yep.
Therefore, the retained urine in my bladder began to reflux into my kidney because I didn't have the luxury of having that long ureter bladder from my kidney to my bladder. So
Right.
once that urine reflux into the kidney, it caused infection. This took me completely blindsided me. 3 months after my transplant, resting, taking a nap, woke up with the worst headache of my life, 103 temperature, no idea. Go back to the emergency room, and that began a journey of what I tell you, it was like falling into an abyss. I had no idea. I sat in general population in the emergency room for probably 7 hours, which was the worst thing. Immediately, I should have been taken in, out of population and taken into a room, isolation, because my immune system is down to zero, being on transplant medications. But they let me sit there. Subsequent to that happening, policies were changed in our emergency room at our local hospital because I made a real stink about it. But yeah, that was quite. No one seemed to know why this was happening to me, and it happened. They put me on antibiotics. Um, it would kill whatever organism I was growing, and 4 weeks later, almost like clockwork, it would hit me again, and without warning. I mean, I could be fine in the mall shopping, and it's like, whew, I don't feel well. Take my temperature, and I'm back in the hospital. And these were not, just your regular run-of-the-mill bugs. A lot of times they were resistant organisms I was growing, requiring, PICC lines, central lines, and things like that. And hospitalizations, week-long stays. And it was very stressful. You're dealing with, is this going to cause my kidney to reject? A lot of things you're going through your head. Why is this happening to me? And so, yes, it was, especially when you're dealing with healthcare providers who don't really take what you're dealing with seriously. I remember one instance when I was admitted. My temperature was 103. I'm extremely dehydrated. And I have a resident come and ask me, why are you here now? Why are you here now? Because all they see is the number of admissions
The insensitivity,
I had. And immediately they began to,
the
you know,
bedside
why are
manners
you,
is horrible on some people.
oh yeah, why are you here now? And my son at the time, I mean, he never, thank God for him, he's been a true blessing, but, he would never leave me. He just was always there. And when I would advocate for myself, and he was like, why are you fighting with these people? And it was like, if I don't fight,
You will.
I'll die. And who's going to do it?
Right.
And,
It almost becomes when you fighting for yourself,
thank God that I'm
when
fighting
you're
for
fighting for
me.
yourself, it's almost like right. When you're fighting for yourself, it's almost like you're the villain. You're not supposed to say anything about anything. You're supposed to just let stuff go. And now you're the bad person because
Yeah,
you're saying something about your care. It's like
right.
it's like you're not supposed to say anything. Just let everybody do whatever to you. And if you say anything, oh, now that person's defiant. You know that no,
Hmm.
man, this is crazy. And I understand where you're coming from with that, man, because um, I have always been the biggest advocate for myself, no matter what. If I don't like what's going on, I'm gonna be the first person to say, I don't care. No, you ain't doing this and doing that, whether
Hmm.
you like it or not. And I've been, been that type of vocal person where that person he gets the bad rap. But no, I'm not getting the bad rap. If you look and see what's going on in these hospitals, sometimes a lot of people who don't say anything are the ones that ended up dead. And I hate to say it like that, is because you're not being an advocate for yourself. And you
Hmm.
got to be an advocate for yourself. You got to speak up if things aren't right. I started this journey when I was 18 years old. I'm 53 now, and straight from college football to being sick right then and there. So I've been that kid who wouldn't say nothing. The doctor's always right, and 9 times out of 10 they usually are. But I'm still gonna speak up now because I've had things done to me that shouldn't have been done. And like I said, I'm Brenda. I clearly understand where you're coming from. Like, oh, now you speak up, you're the bad person, and it's not true. But I want to go back to what you said about the kidney and the bladder. That's so true. What we're starting to see sometimes with these doctors is the placement of the kidney, because if you place the kidney in a wrong area, what happens is that the urine can back up in the kidney, and when that backs up in there, it can make the kidney toxic, and it can even back up in the bladder also, where it's a flap that closes and flushes, and and sometimes it's not closing properly,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
you make sense, and that's why it's imperative that the doctors have to place the kidney in a proper way so the thing can empty out properly into the bladder, so the bladder can empty out properly also. So you're right
Right.
about that, and that's where the
Right.
toxicity comes from.
Right. Right. And what I questioned my surgery. Was it the actual transplant surgeon, or was it a resident that was doing
And the
my
placement of the
surgery
kidney
done?
can be the problem.
Yeah, yeah. I did some research on that, to find out if, you have a plastic surgery go in to actually manipulate that flap that you're talking about. They could go back after the fact to do that. But when I was fortunate enough to, again, educate myself, because after having so many infections, the urologist questioned him, where's going? And the options he gave me was, one, do nothing. Well, I knew what do nothing was. I'm still going to be in the hospital every 4 to 6 weeks. Number two, put a Foley catheter in. Well, that's going to lead to more infections. Or do an ileal conduit. And that's basically like doing a colostomy for urine. And I'm
Mhm.
54 years old, though neither one of those are options for me. So then I'm getting extremely depressed. So I began to research to find out, what other options are about this device called an InterStim, which is a bladder stimulator. It's an implanted device there are wires that are attached to the nerves in the spine that help to innervate the nerves of the bladder to help your muscles to know when to relax and to contract to help with relaxation for your bladder to help get rid of the retained urine. Well, no one in my area was doing it. Their doctor there was. And so I requested my patient care coordinator, my transplant coordinator, to get me an appointment there. And she did. And I met with the doctor, and he was agreeable to put the device in. Now, this is a kicker. When I asked him why did my urologist at Shands not put the device in, he told me that the doctor at Shands was a research, doing research. Okay, being I had he put the device in, I became infected again. It would skew his research and his research dollars. However, at Mayo Clinic, being they're private, they get the results of their research and are able to put the device in whoever they choose because they can purchase the research and the device. There again, money driven.
The guinea pig situation. That's, we see these things all the time, especially from these hospitals that are
Yeah.
always researching. They start researching on you. And my second transplant was at John Hopkins University, and it's a teaching hospital. And I told them, they did a documentary on my transplant and everything. It's on my website of Kidney Care Coaches. I told them, they got mad at me, but I told them, I was like, look, you're not gonna guinea pig me out. You're doing all kinds of things to me, and they got mad. And I was like, I don't care if you get mad. I don't care. I'm just gonna keep it 100. We don't do those things. Horse shit. We do those things, and I told them, and they were like, ticked off with me and everything. And I would come up on my transplant floor, and I was the bad guy, but I didn't care. I was like, look, man, I ain't having anything done to me, just all crazy and stuff. It was.
Yeah.
So I understand your challenge with that, but I know about the education and things like that, and we can educate people till the wheels fall off. And I know that's, but this cycle, when people don't know this cycle, as soon as you hear about the kidneys, okay, we're gonna start mapping you. Okay, we're gonna get you ready for dialysis, and that cog in the wheel right there. I feel right before if somebody gets sick, there has to be something else where somebody comes in and say, hey, well, these are the. I don't know how we're gonna do it because we all know that this is a $40 billion industry that keeps on being pushed by the Black and brown people. But how do we put this how do we put this inside where we go, hold on, there's other ways you can handle this kidney disease. Let's talk about the root cause of your kidney disease. Is it diabetes? Is it high blood pressure? Is it glomerulonephritis? Is it this or is it that? Opposed to, we don't even talk about those things. We just put this person on dialysis. Where does that gap? How do we bridge that gap? That's where I'm at.
Well, it could even go back as far as to the primary care physician who is treating these comorbidities such as diabetes, such as high blood pressure, to say that my patient is headed on this road to end-stage renal disease or kidney disease. And so now, if they're at this point, I need to stop and say, hey, their creatinine starting to rise. I need to start educating them now before they get to the point to where I'm referring them to nephrology for X, Y, and Z related to dialysis. Let me get them in with nutrition. Let me get them in with a nurse educator to begin to educate them on what their possible alternative therapies are prior to dialysis. I mean, I think there is a way, but it has to start like with education, like we're saying, it's so important being taught nutrition, in medical school. They aren't being, educated themselves on certain things, and it doesn't roll down to their patients. But I believe, it can be done, but it has to be at I believe the primary care physician can do it. The community health can do it. These programs have to be made available to be accessible, but it has to be education at the community level. Uh, um, Places like organizations like EMET, what they're doing, primarily education, awareness. They're putting things in the community. They have a huge event going to be happening in Jacksonville, being put on to educate the community there. But education is vital. It cannot be done without that. But those places, and it's not just educating minority
Right.
and be
And
avail
Brenda, I think
themselves.
some of the education has to be, Brenda, I think the education has to be on specific things too in that
Hmm.
area. Hey, let's talk about type 2 diabetes. Now we all know type 2 diabetes is the leading cause of kidney disease. You can walk into any dialysis unit in America, and I guarantee 85% of the people sitting there is all because of diabetes and high blood
I
pressure,
agree.
which are the two things that can be prevented. We all know this.
Oh,
Now, if we was to reach the youth and start talking about diabetes, juvenile diabetes, I've spoken at several schools. Matter of fact, when I get back to Tampa, I'll be speaking at an elementary school about the importance of juvenile diabetes and high blood pressure, talking about that. And I believe in, reaching the youth. I believe in that's really, really big. But also, if we can put a proponent in that could somehow decrease juvenile diabetes, type 2 diabetes, and high blood pressure, we could cut the people going to dialysis and kidney transplants probably in half
I agree.
in a matter of time, in 10 years, 20 years, something like that.
But look what our youth are eating. Look
Right.
what they're eating, and it starts with what's available to them.
Right.
It
I come
starts.
from a background, I had when I was on dialysis, the first time I had my own fitness studio. I was a fitness trainer and I was a nutritionist. So that's when I started, creating programs for patients in dialysis and creating nutrition for people on dialysis so they can keep their protein up because
Mhm.
they wasn't understanding about, you got to keep your muscles too when you're on dialysis. You got to keep, you got to keep strong. And so I would create exercise programs for them and things like that as well. So there's a lot of information out there. We just got to start getting into the youth and getting it into certain areas. And when that gap, I feel that gap of, from diabetes, from the gap from, okay, you're about to go on dialysis, that gap needs to be closed where we can start educating people in that. Like, hold on, you can eat better. You can do an alkaline diet. You can stop eating the meats. You can get your proteins from beans and different types of vegetables, organic proteins, things like that. Let's keep our bodies alkaline, things like that. All these other ways, not saying people aren't still going to go on dialysis, but I guarantee if we educate people in that gap, we will start seeing people get healthier, and not just on dialysis, but getting healthier on overall body. Oh, preventing obesity, preventing a lot of things that go with that. So that's just my point.
I agree, but what I've seen is that not only that, but to make people realize that it's dialysis is made. You know,
I agree.
yeah, I've seen it where it's become generational. Well, granted, it was
I
on
have too.
dialysis.
Yes.
My,
Yes.
my aunt was on
Yes.
dialysis, and so and so and so. Well, they tell me I have to go on dialysis. It's okay. They did all right. It's okay. So and so we have to make help people realize it's really not okay. It's not the where you're going to get better. So let's make sure we don't get there. Can we do to
Right.
prevent you from getting there? Like you say, you know, what preventative measures can we exercise? Whatever we can do to help you not get to that point, let's implement that. And reaching the youth, I think, is an excellent idea because if you look at some of that they're eating now, we know what road they're heading to: type 2 diabetes. Their
Yep.
diets are laden with
Yep.
sugar. Their diets are laden with,
Yep.
carbohydrates. So, I absolutely agree that that could be, an area that is a breeding ground for trying to stop what is happening with locally with the outreach coordinator at the Organ Procurement Center. I became an ambassador, and that's one area that we target with particular for organ registration for donation is the youth at high schools. But to try to get in and just pound it in them, change your diets, eat better, prevent diabetes because we don't want you to become, a dialysis patient in the future. I think that's an absolutely, wonderful, wonderful place to start somewhere. Key. It has to start somewhere.
Okay, that sounds good. I don't have any more questions, Brenda. It was great talking to you, and I
It
love
was
talking to people like yourself who are like-minded, who understand what's going on. Your knowledge is impeccable. To be in a dialysis situation like you are, and the information that because you've seen it come and go. You understand it all. So kudos to you. I wish you well. Are you on the transplant list to get another transplant?
I am. I just had my final transplant readiness appointment at Mayo, and
Good.
they're very motivated to get me a kidney. I've been listed with them since 2019. Their average wait time is 3 to 5 years, so I'm right there, and I'm in preparation now to get double listed at Orlando Health. So it's going to happen. It's going
And let
to
me
happen. So I'm
just
excited.
that's great. Let me tell you something. Look into when you talk to your doctors when they're about to do a transplant, ask them, I know you're going to tell them about what happened last time because you're
Mhm.
knowledgeable and stuff, but ask them about the placement of the kidney because when I went to John Hopkins, they informed me about that, and I went into it deeper. I was like, let's talk about this. Hold on,
Oh
what's
yeah.
going on with that? And then
Mhm.
they started. As I start prying, they had to answer my questions, and I was like, "What are you talking about? The placement of the kidney?" And they were like, "Well, the placement of the kidney has a lot to do with if the urine backs up into the bladder and things like that, and that's when it becomes toxic. So make sure you talk about them with that. Like, let's talk about this kid bladder, because when you're your second transplant, they put it on. Now they're going to put the other one on your left side, because they
Yes.
started with the right side. So that's when placement becomes very, very important because it just becomes important anyway. And Phil, this goes out to you too when you're about to get your transplant. Talk to them about the placement, and they have to go into detail when you start going into detail about it to learn more as much as you can.
See, that was never a question. That was never a conversation. It was just like, well, you're going to surgery in the morning, you have your transplant,
Right.
but there was never any question about nothing like that. So that was wonderful, observation you made right there, and eye opener for me going into a second transplant. And so yeah, I'm looking forward to being uh, uh, in the level with you Pharaoh of a second transplant recipient.
Sounds good. I have no more questions. Like I said, it was a great interview. Thank you so much. Go ahead, Phil.
Thank you guys. I
Yeah. No.
appreciate it. It's been a great show.
Thank you. So I have one last question for you, just to kind of have this kind of come full circle. You brought up EMAT before. What what kind of assistance have you gotten from them that you've seen be helpful to you? And when I say assistance, I mean uh, education, support, that type of assistance. I think you're
I
muted.
found email just by chance on Facebook. I didn't even know they were in existence.
Mm,
And just flipping through, perusing Facebook, I found, thing, and I investigated her and reached out to Miss Brill, who is a woman, founder of EMET Educating. Reached out to her and actually met one in Jacksonville, and that's where they're located. And we met one day and just struck it off and had great conversation, like-minded, and I knew I wanted to be a member right away. They're an excellent source of support, a wealth of knowledge and information. Their Facebook page, they're recently, uploading information about transplants. They have um, very great network with the local hospital systems, doctors' offices, dialysis units, far-reaching as far as how they interact with their local community in Jacksonville. But they also, their members, very, very active members. They have miraculous members and their stories. And it's very inspirational just to, read through them, what they've been through and how they've overcome. It's just been, I've been extremely, extremely happy being a member. And I'm in Gainesville. They're in Jacksonville, about 2 hours away. But I stay in good contact with them, always, sharing things from their page. I think sure, wonderful job with this group, and to know that I think they incorporated 2015. I may be wrong, but organization that has longevity such as that, it's amazing. It's amazing. But as far as how they have helped me, they do things like now they're working on doing a rat card for me that we can hand out at different events to get my story out. At different events they've afforded me the opportunity to share my story. Just anyone that's listening, that one yes makes a difference. And so our theme now for this year is, see the faces, hear the stories, feel the love. And that's what we want to do through sharing, what's going on with our stories, how we got there, what we need. And through email, we hope to just do that, just network share, what's going on in each other's lives, what we need, and that we can, someone out there is going to be able to give a kidney and step up to be the plate, to be a donor. So we're excited. I'm happy to be a member. It's really made a difference in my life.
Awesome.
Awesome,
Awesome.
awesome.
Great.
Well, thank you again, Brenda, for joining us. Greatly appreciate you and your time. As always, Mr. Cook, appreciate you. We'll be back this coming Monday with Shannon Monroy. She's also a part of Kidney Solutions. She's a living donor, and she'll have a couple of people that's a part of her story as well. And she has a very dynamic story as a living donor that I'm sure that I'm very excited to hear the whole thing, and I know Mr. Cook loves hearing stories like these as well. And you will also um, watching. So tune in next Monday. Next Thursday, we'll be having our FSGS conference that'll be hosted by Mr. Cook and Mr. Fred Hill. I myself will not be a part of it. I'll be undergoing surgery on that day, so I have to step aside and let the masters be at work for that day. Um, so definitely tune in for next week's shows. Thank you again for watching. We definitely appreciate you. For more information, you can go to my Facebook page or Mr. Cook's Facebook page, or our Second Chance Facebook page. We're also on Instagram as well and LinkedIn. So definitely, if you need help with anything, especially in the kidney space, definitely reach out to us. We'll be more than happy to help you. So thanks again, Brenda. We greatly appreciate you and your time, and we'll see you all next week.
Peace. Thank you, Brenda. We appreciate you.
Thanks, guys.